Ladies and gentlemen, so in medias res, we have just heard that prevention is not fire prevention yet, but it is supposed to be fire prevention instead of an extinguisher. Often intervention and prevention are confused, and I think in our everyday life we see this quite frequently. What about you and your areas? What do you think prevention is, and what should prevention do and cover? Well, first of all, good morning to all of you. It's a pleasure to be here in Dresden, and I am so pleased to see such a turnout, so many people who, from the police or security offices or civil society organizations, have come here working towards prevention. In Germany, we have a situation that's not always simple. But I am somebody who has been in practical life for many years. I've been with a Berlin department as a practical politician, and I think it's important to form a triangle between prevention, reaction, and repression. And I think it is important for politics to send out this message that we support all three sides of that. Prevention is a very important first step. And if somebody, however, surpasses limits and we have a problem, then we have to be able to react, and we have to say that we stretch out our hands, but there is at the same time a moment where we say stop. I think this is very, very important, and I think this is especially true for police authorities. They need us to back them up, and this is why I'm here, because this is the signal that I would like to send out, and I would like to thank those who every day stand for this important topic. I've seen some faces from Berlin, the prevention officer of Berlin-Neukölln, who a few days ago sent me a message, and I'll just quote. It's the dean of a school, and he wrote or said, if you have a mosque in the backyard, if families advise their daughter to wear a headscarf because there's so much pressure from the street, then you must not believe that the school can act. Here, politics have to act. And, you know, I've thought about this a lot. I think actually it's up to all of us, not only politicians, but also politicians. And we can only act together. And this is why it's so good to have all the levels, the federal and the regional and the municipal one, so that we can show that we have to cooperate, that this is the only way, and that we have to work on all levels towards that. And this is, of course, why I wish us and you a lot of fruitful exchanges here today, and that we manage to talk about the difficult parts as well, because otherwise it won't work. And safety and security is a topic that is very decisive for integration as well, and it touches the question of how we want our country to be, and this is what I stand for. The State Premier of Saxony is nodding his head, because here in Saxony we did debate the reduction of police jobs, which were reduced and now are being built up again. But this is not all that prevention is about here in Saxony. It's not only about so-called repressive prevention, but a lot of active prevention coming from the civil society. So what is good prevention for you? Well, of course, my experience is from municipal politics, dating back to the 90s, and there the situation was quite difficult. There were right-wing extremists, and it became clear that it is not an issue that the police and the prosecution authorities can do by themselves, but that instead you need all of society. We need networking of schools, churches, sports clubs, and many other stakeholders who together make clear that there are limits beyond which certain things are not allowed, and that the majority is within those limits. And this is why I believe that this kind of prevention has to be supported wherever it is possible. Police people tell me over and over again what you have just mentioned, that this is something you cannot leave to the police. It's a topic that has to have its roots firmly planted in the midst of society. And prevention, at the end of the day, then is a local task. It's a very concrete, hands-on task. And I believe that it is important to support this prevention work with many schemes and programs. I am very happy about your success in continuing the agenda Living Democracy. It's an important one that we here in Saxony benefit from as well. We have our own agendas attached to that, and we join forces because we have realized that we can only be successful together. And of course, we will increase the number of police. Everywhere in Germany 10 years ago, people thought that we don't need so many people with the police force because the society will change. But in Saxony and at a federal level, we do react now. The prosecution is also enhanced. Then there is the youngsters' legal advice, which Sebastian Gemko and myself have instigated here in Dresden. Dresden has its own concept, and this is not about only marching down one path. What I would like to see is a principle where those who as youngsters have trouble with the law do feel consequences of their actions quickly so that they have a chance to learn that this is no way to do it, that there are limits in a society that you have to keep within. The topic of the Crime Prevention Congress is violence and radicalization. Criminal prevention, of course, happens everywhere. Mr. Sittel here in Dresden, we also have a Crime Prevention Council, and I think you're ahead of it and have been since '96, if I am informed correctly. But here in Dresden and elsewhere, we also have other problems. So violence and radicalization as a topic. I would like to ask you now, how do you deal with this topic here in Dresden? Well, it is true that since 1996 we have a Criminal Prevention Council in Dresden, and over the years the focus changed. Over the first few years it was about classic violence prevention, first of all. It was prevention of crimes, and over the past few years, extremism prevention has become an important point. And in classic crime prevention, this does not play so much of a role. But we have realized that there is a very essential key that you have to use before prevention starts, and this is actually social groundworks. This means that education is the focus of our municipal policies. Our former mayor was very active in that. So education at an early stage in kindergarten, for example, already. But of course you have to enable schools to do their part as well. In family, this is where the actual education takes place. And then there are kindergartens and schools. And if there is a definite deficit anywhere, we need prevention that covers all of the sectors, and here often it's not very efficient to act only from one source, but you have to get them all on board. And the Crime Prevention Council has focused on the problem that most of prevention work is voluntary, so there's a lack of time and money, and connecting all the sources is difficult, and you have to do so with limited resources. However, what is obvious is that prevention is a local topic that entails many concepts, even in a city, and topics to do with extremism have different shades and forms in different neighborhoods in the city. So we break it down to the city neighborhood so as to find out what the structure of the population looks like, where the approach could be, and which incentives lead to difficulties. And I think this is the key. Joint, connected action, but at the same time room for individual concepts, local ones. Thank you. I may add that you have an agenda that is called Unfolding Democracy, that the city is funding generously until the end of 2018. This is a Dresden scheme. Ms. Marx mentioned the triangle that is needed in prevention, so I could ask you, What does that look like? In your case, prevention rests on different shoulders, different departments. Is that a proven concept? Actually, just say yes or no, because there's a more important question that I would like to follow it up with, and that's prevention research. I hear about many people who deal with prevention research. We need evaluated programs. We need a defined structure so that we can stop working in different corners. We have to gain speed and we have to be able to compare our data. So is money available for that? Well, okay, first of all, I'll just tell you what we have money for. The state premier has already mentioned it. There is the program Living Democracy of the federal government. And here we could say we evaluate, we get feedback from the local level, and the feedback is quite positive. It seems to work. We fund approximately 600 projects and 3,000 individual activities, so there are thousands of people who foster democracy all over Germany. It actually was a temporary program that we wanted to close at the end of this year, but then I decided that in the situation in which we are now, we cannot afford closing this program. Taking a look at all the discussions that we have in our country, looking at all the hatred and the discrimination. No, we can't afford it to terminate this problem or even maybe reduce it to a smaller scale. And this is why we discussed it with our Ministry of Finance, and we will even enhance it. 150 million euros will be spent within the framework of Living Democracy, and this is also the case for next year. There are 16 democracy centers in Germany where, for example, victims of radicalization find a point of contact or leaving extreme groups. Then there are all kinds of programs, 18 of them here in Saxony, and we have federal institutions that take a close look at what works, what you can do locally, how you can support your stakeholders. And I think it's actually these hands-on experiences. It is taking a look at it, saying this works and this doesn't. This is the best basis for the development of new programs and agendas. And I think we have to continue, especially when it comes to the prevention of extremism in schools. There is a prevention program in schools against Islamization, and there are anti-bullying programs that work in schools, trying to solve interreligious conflicts, for example. And it is also about sending people to schools as a coach for respect. And these people try to raise the topics in school, because bullying is a topic in all German schools, and this is where it starts. It starts with the question, how do young people arrive in a situation where they're so dissatisfied that they start blaming others and they're frustrated because they're not doing well in school? And if this is the case, they try to find other ways of expressing themselves. And I mean, here, once again, we start with good early education. So do children go to the first class not speaking the language, and will it continue like that? Or can we prevent that by better early education, or day-long children's care? Doesn't it start there, so that young people then can say, I want to do something. My perspective is not living on social benefits, but I want to do something for myself. And this is a very important prevention point.
The question also targeted scientific research about these programs on all levels, to make sure that these programs are perceived as serious, and the seriousness can be used as an argument for raising funds from sources that have not contributed yet, and convince them that continuous prevention work costs money and also has to lead to prevention politics. Mr. State Premier, can you agree with that? Yes, I agree that there should be more research accompanying these programs, because it would also help us in the end to provide the evidence that we need. And everyone who works in this field already knows that without these programs and without the support, many things wouldn't even be possible. We've just mentioned social work in the schools, social work in general. We also have the insight that we have to continue to invest in this, and that it is the school as a space for debate and as a social space where everything is being discussed. So starting with the next school year, all secondary schools in the Free State of Saxony will have a school social worker. If we have more staff available for that, we can also include other schools in the scheme. But this is a very important issue for us, to break up these circles in the social sphere and to make sure that children who grow up in families who get social benefits do not end up having to get them themselves, and to prevent them from inheriting the values from their parents if they are extreme. So we have to provide a counterbalance to that. School is, of course, an important place for that, but school alone cannot provide that. And this is only really successful if we have a cooperation with the municipal communities, with the sports clubs, with the churches, and with the police. So this is a very important investment that costs a lot of money, but I think it's worth it. And I also think that it should become a standard in Germany that social work is provided at schools. This is a logical consequence of our education system. Just briefly, Mr. Sittel, by way of conclusion, that's why I'm keeping the microphone. We have to close. What is a blind spot for you here in Dresden? Well, there is no real blind spot in my point of view, but we have understood that there is a central element of responsibility, and that is responsibility for the fate of a city, which does not only lie with the city administration or the Lord Mayor, but the citizens of the city have this responsibility themselves, and everyone has to understand that prevention is a task for everyone, even though it's difficult to measure what contribution the individual can make. And this responsibility begins with trust, because apart from all criminal careers or criminal trajectories, prevention always has to do with trust and confidence in the state and in the city administration. And that is what we have to build. So in the political discussions, we should not focus on what separates us, but we should also focus on the joint cause that we're working for. Thank you very much. We will hear more about this in the second panel. Thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen, for participating. There's just one more announcement from the minister. That was agreed with Mr. Marx. Yes, I get the floor again. This is the Prevention Day 2018, but there is also a Prevention Congress in 2019, and I would like to make the following announcement. When you are ready to leave this day motivated with new momentum for next year, you can look forward to the next Prevention Congress, the 24th Prevention Congress, which will take place in Berlin. And I can tell you that the Federal Ministry for Family Affairs will be a co-host for this Prevention Congress, and the Federal Ministry will provide a budget to accommodate over 3,000 guests in a hotel in Berlin. And now I wish you a successful Congress, and see you next year.